So maybe you've done some research and now you're ready to hire some people to help you source books. So you don't have to go ahead and source books. You can spend more time focused on the business. Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks and tools and resources that I've used to hire some of my book sourcers to help me grow my business. Let's get started. Hey guys, this is Lenny from SimonSaysResell, where I go ahead and share my experiences selling on Amazon, specifically books, but I also sell some toys and some other things like that. We also have some how-to videos and some other easy videos for you guys to follow, so you can go ahead and get started selling on Amazon. But this video in particular, we're going to go ahead and talk about hiring people to help you source books. Because mainly, you start off usually by yourself, maybe with a partner, a business partner, helping you out. But let's face it, most of the time we start off by ourselves to kind of, learn the ropes, see what's out there, test the waters, if you want to call it that. Maybe you have a certain amount of money, a certain budget to start with. But ultimately, what you really want to shoot for, once you get familiar with things, is hiring people, is growing your business. Because you don't want to sit there and go out every weekend or every day sourcing books. You don't want to go ahead and sit there and list the products. It might take an hour or two or more depending on how many books and things like that you're selling. So you kind of want to keep that in the back of your mind is, how can I grow my business? And one great way to do that is to hire people. So I'm going to share with you in this video kind of my experience and what I've done so far. Specifically to that is how I've grown my business, having people help me source books. Not so much list, pack, and ship books, and I'll get to that later, but specifically sourcing books for you. I obviously started off myself. I tested the waters. I went to Goodwills, Salvation Armies, as you've heard in other videos that I've made. Once I got the hang of it, once I did my research, and which is a really important part, which I'll get to soon, I went ahead and thought about how can I hire people to work for me and help me grow my business so I don't have to go out and source books. So one very important thing to learn is, what I've learned from this is, do your research. Meaning, if you're ready to go ahead and hire people, do research in the areas, in the places that you're going to be sending the sourcers to, or generally where you're sending the sourcers to. For example, if you're surrounded by Goodwills, if you're surrounded by Salvation Armies, if you're surrounded by thrift stores, or however way you can get books, for example, go there yourself. Check them out. Maybe go to a couple yard sales yourself. Get the experience. So, because the best thing to do is once you do that, you have the experience to share with the book sourcers or the people you're hiring, and it's easier to kind of relate to that. It's easier to explain, what to expect, what not to expect, things like that. So, what I did, and you kind of do it anyway, is you go to Goodwills, you go to Salvation Armies, you go to yard sales, you actually go there to source books yourself, but at the same time you're getting experience. So when it comes time to hire people, you can explain to them, because they'll have questions. For sure they'll have questions. They'll have questions like, where do I go? How much are books? Blah, 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 blah. And you can pretty much answer most of those questions right off the bat because you did it already. So the very first thing to do before you start putting ads out there, before you start hiring people, is do your research. And part of it is going to the places. Not only going to the places, but also seeing how much things cost. For example, the Goodwills around me, which I mentioned before, paperbacks are $1, hardcovers are $2, and specialty books like cookbooks are $3. But you can't take what I just said and say that to your book sourcers and say, go ahead and have fun, because the prices will probably be different. So that's what I mean by do your research. Go ahead and go out, do the research you need to do to see how much things are. Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe it just isn't worth going to that particular source. So do your research is very important. So yeah, I went ahead and I did my research. I went to Goodwills, book sales, garage sales, blah, blah, blah. And I pretty much got that knowledge. And luckily for me, I am surrounded by Goodwills, so most of the Goodwills actually all of them are pretty much the same price, $1, $2, $3, and that's it. I've definitely gotten feedback from other viewers and listeners that the prices are a little different. Maybe they're $2, $3, $4. So what you need to do is, when you do your research, figure out how much things cost. Now, garage sales are a little different because the prices can be all over the place, because it's not, a company, it's not a business really, it's just a personal, individual selling stuff, so they can price it however the hell they want. But usually the prices are really good. 50 cents, $1, $2, $3 a book, so keep that in mind as well. But when you do your research, first do your research. Secondly, go ahead and find a price that you're going to pay your book sourcers for each book, for example. Come to a price that makes sense for you and for them. Because on one side, you want them to have an initiative. You want them to, see that there's potential, there's money to be made in this little job you're hiring them for. And the other side, make sure you're not spending way too much money. Make sure you're making a profit on that. So by the end of the day, you'll come out, in the plus, in the positives. So I'm going to break it down for you really quick how this works, or how I found out how it works. And you can use whatever method you want, but this is what I use. Again, the prices that I use may not work for you, but it's just more of a guideline. So for example, given I know, the Goodwills in my area have $1, $2, $3 prices, I told my book sourcers to only shoot for the books that are really under $2 or under, because if I'm paying them $2.50, and that was my price was $2.50 is what I pay my book sourcers for every book that they gave back to me. If it's pretty much a buy on the app, on the FBA scan app that I give them, and also they visually inspect it. So $2.50. Why did I come up with that, or how did I come up with that? Mainly because I'm setting almost all my book sourcers to Goodwills, and again, around here it's $1 or $2. So if they buy a book for $1, I give them $2.50 for it. They pretty much get $1.50, give or take taxes and stuff like that they have to pay for. So the other question I get from people is, how do the book sourcers pay for the books that they give me? It comes out of their pocket. So, and I kind of tell them, it's in your best interest, book sourcer, to get the books as cheap as you possibly can, because that is more money for you. So I personally don't care how much they got the book for. If they pay nothing for it, I don't care. If they paid $2 for it, I don't really care. All I know is I'm giving them $2.50 for a book that's, that meets my standards, or whatever you want to call it. So make sure that you do your research. That's why I come back to the research. Is you don't want to say I'll give you $2.50 for a book, and then you send them out to a Goodwill and it's $3, $4, $5 for each book, or paperback, hardcover. There's no point. They're not going to do that. So make it worth their while, make it worth your while, and make it work. Now again, that might not work for all of you. So do your research. Some people. I have talked to someone that I mentioned before. He lives in New York. He doesn't live in. He lives in the city, so he doesn't have a car, which most New Yorkers don't. I used to live in New Jersey, and I understand why. I used to live in Chicago, and I also understand why. So doing this type of thing, you may need to make some adjustments, because you don't have a car to drive to a book sale to throw books in, or you don't have a Goodwill to drive to all the time. Maybe they take the train. I mean, that might not be worthwhile. So what I usually tell people in that situation is do your research. One thing that may work for that individual that lives in this city, or a city, for example, is maybe you have a friend, relative, girlfriend, whatever, boyfriend that lives outside the city, or somewhere where there are Goodwills and thrift stores accessible. Maybe visit them every now and then, and make it a thing to go out to those Goodwills and use their car or whatever. So be creative. So I paid $2.50 for every book. Now, I've read other places where people pay $2 for every book, and that's great, but that wouldn't work for me, because what happens if they get a $2 hardcover book at Goodwill? They make no money. So first and foremost, do research. From the research, you set a price that works for you, and it works for your book sourcers. Next comes, the hiring, how and where and stuff like that. So once you've done your research, once you got a price set, there are places to hire people from, and pretty much I only use one place that's been pretty successful. It's Craigslist. By far the best place to hire people, in my opinion. There may be others, but it's worked out so well for me that I don't really have to go anywhere else. And this is what I do. So in the description, I'm going to put some information. What I do is I create a Craigslist ad. It's $35 a month, flat fee, one time a month. And that's just how their ads run. Because if you go to Craigslist and you look for the job section, and I usually put it under general job or retail job, one of those. You have to pick a category when you create a Craigslist ad. You choose the general, retail, labor, or general labor type of category of a job. You just follow a wizard. It'll ask you what category, which I just told you. It'll ask you to fill in your ad, your information, stuff like that. You'll see how much it is at top. For me, it's $35, which I think is more than reasonable, because I'm getting a lot of feedback after that. So you follow the wizard, and you kind of pop in a text ad. I will share with you. I will cut and paste the same ad that I use on my ads for Craigslist into the description of this video, so you guys can just use it. I don't care. It works. So obviously change it any way you want, change the wording around. You obviously have to change the cities and the counties because I mentioned that in the ad. So don't just copy it verbatim there. Make sure you change some of the wording. But ultimately what it says is, hey, I have an online business. I'm looking for people, book scouters, to help me grow my business. And I basically explain to them, really simple, but not too in detail. I basically say, have fun going to Goodwills, garage sales, blah, blah, blah in your spare time. We'll pay you $2.50 per book. We provide you with an app. We provide you with some training to look at the books visually and stuff like that. And you pay the books. You pay for the books yourself, and we give you the difference. You profit the difference, kind of thing. That's pretty much what it is. Again, I'll put it in the description so you can see it. So what I do once I finish the ad, I hit submit. Honestly, the same day I submit that ad, I will get at least 10 emails, at least the same day. And maybe the next day, another 10 or 15 or 20. Third day, right around the same. And then pretty much after the fourth, fifth, sixth, maybe after a week or so, my emails start to die. Emails from the ad, people interested, start to die down. So it's a huge spike in the beginning, and then it kind of drops off. But I'm okay. Ultimately, within 2 weeks, I can get 20, 30 emails. So, and what I do, a quick tip, is when I first did it, I put in Craigslist, you can choose how they can contact you, either by your phone number or email or whatever. My recommendation is to use Craigslist kind of email format where your email is hidden behind Craigslist, so they don't actually see your email yet. Don't put your phone number. I mean, that's just my recommendation. Don't put your phone number, because let's say you do get a huge spike in responses. You'll be getting texts all over the place. When they text you, you're not going to see their name because you have no idea who they are, because it's a brand new number coming to your phone. So after a while, it can be a little overwhelming. You may get 10 or 12 texts from these random people, and you can lose track of them pretty easily. Yes, you can add them as a contact and stuff like that. But what I like to do, honestly, in the actual the ad, it kind of makes them work a bit for the job or the position. So at the end, I basically say, tell me why you think you're a good fit for the position and some other things. So it makes them work for it. And also, if people really want this, they'll send an email. Texting is a hell of a lot easier, believe me, but I don't want someone that's lazy that's just going to say, I want a job, hire me. And believe me, I've gotten some people that asked me that straight first response from a text ad. I was like, wow. So let them be a little creative, maybe open their mind a bit. In my career, I was a manager for 6 years, and I've hired over 100 people in my career, and I kind of know some things and how to format certain things and what to ask them when you hire them. But mainly what you're trying to get out of them is you want them to take the initiative to actually sit down in front of their computer, maybe their phone, but send an email to me telling me why they think they're a good fit. And you just sit and wait. And honestly, if you do this, I can't imagine you not getting at least 5 responses within the first 24 hours. Like it's incredibly fast. I mean, at least I'm in South Florida, so maybe it's just the area I'm in, but it's pretty quick as far as the responses to the ad. So instantly, I'm almost overwhelmed with emails, but I can manage them. It's a hell of a lot easier to manage an email or 10 emails than it is 10 text messages, because you already have their email address. You already know what's going on, but they don't know your email address yet. So that's also a good safety, I guess, feature of that. So let's say someone emails me with a pretty decent response saying, hey, my name is so-and-so. I love books. I read them all the time. I'm looking for some extra money. I'm a student, or I'm a single parent, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it all. So they give you a pretty good response, and it's really up to you if you want to pursue them or not. But generally, if they put more than a paragraph or maybe a few sentences in the response, I consider that pretty good. Obviously, it depends on what they say, but generally, it's a pretty good time to move forward. So when they email me first, they'll say, hey, my name is so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. If they don't mention it, which I don't know if I mentioned in my ad, but if they don't mention it at first, I'll respond to them saying, hey, thanks for reaching out. My name is Lenny. Here's my story. And I kind of tell them, hey, I live in South Florida. I have a family. I have kids. I have a full-time job. This book thing is part-time. So they instantly know kind of where I am. I mentioned a little more about the position, a little more than what I mentioned in the original description of the ad. You go around to Goodwills when you can. You need transportation. You need a cell phone, blah, 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 or a smartphone to install the app on. And those are the requirements too. So in the ad, you'll see The only two things I require for the position or from them, is transportation, so they can travel and drive around wherever they need to, whenever they can, and a smartphone, Apple, Android, whatever, so I can install the FBA scan app on their phone. So they respond back to me. I go ahead and say, hey, my name is Lenny. Here's my story. Here's more about the position. And pretty much the last thing I mentioned is, if you're still interested, let me know. We'll chat. So the next step is a phone call. So I'll email them with that information. It'll get sent to them maybe in a few minutes or a few hours or a few days. They'll come back and say, hey, Lenny, this sounds great. I'm available Thursday at 8 p.m. Wonderful. So we'll set up a time to call each other. So the next stage is a phone call. And it's important to do the phone call. First, the email, because what you're gauging from the email is seeing how they articulate things, how they put words together. Maybe they're educated, maybe they're not. Doesn't really matter, just as long as they can, follow directions, and they're a pretty decent person. You don't know anything about them yet. So yes, there's a risk. There's a learning curve. There's a lot involved in just finding some random person on Craigslist to be a part of your business. And yeah, it's scary because, it's your business. You don't want them to mess it up. But the good thing is they're not really exposed to too much yet, and I'll explain what they're exposed to in a second. But so once we set up the call, we talk, just like I'm talking to the camera right now to you guys. I tell them about the business a bit more. Usually the first thing I ask them when I talk to them is, hey, do you have any questions to start with yourself? Do you have any questions for me? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And they're all pretty easy questions. Most of it I've either already explained on this video or you've seen in a past video of mine. But some people ask me, what happens if they start asking about where you sell, how much money you're making, blah, blah, blah. Well, I kind of don't directly answer them about that because one, it's really none of their business. But two, I do give them a little bit of, rope as far as what I do and how I do it. I basically say I sell online on different platforms, eBay, Amazon, they don't know. And it's just extra, passive income. This isn't my full-time job. I do this part-time. I'm looking to grow the business, and that's pretty much it. I'm looking for people to help me grow the company. And, if things work out, there's other opportunities for them to grow with the company as well. And that usually kind of settles them off, and they're usually okay at that point. But don't get too descriptive. Don't tell them you sell on Amazon, this is your store name, this is what. Don't do that. Try to be as vague as possible because honestly, they don't really need to know. If they start getting pushy, maybe they're not the right person. So once you talk, you chat, what I do next is I set up a time to meet. Usually a public place, a Starbucks, a parking lot in front of a Starbucks, wherever, a cafe, a restaurant, The meeting itself should take no more than a half an hour. That's what I usually tell them, because what you do is you meet up. What I do is I bring a couple books along with me, some good and bad ones. What I mean by good and bad is, good ones meaning there's profit to them, because when you scan it, it's going to show a buy, but it won't show them the details as far as profit and stuff, and I'll explain why. And I bring bad ones, maybe some with rips and mold and mildew, so they can see the difference. So we meet up. Obviously it's just the person you're talking to. So it's like, hey, my name's Lenny. Nice to meet you. Thank you for meeting with me. Let's get started. Let's go ahead and talk about, do you have any more questions before we begin? No, okay, great. What I'm gonna do, and I usually tell this to them on the phone before I meet them, is once we meet, I'm going to ask for your phone. I'm gonna put the FBA scan app on your phone. I'm gonna sign up for it. I'm gonna install it, stuff like that, and set the triggers because I have triggers that I give them. I have another video on how to set up triggers. And then I train them. I have them scan the books that I brought with their phones and say, okay, scan this book, great. It's a buy or it's a reject. I don't tell them why, and they ask, well, what makes this book a buy or reject? Because, hey, maybe they know the book. Maybe that person's like, this is a great book. This is Twilight, or this is, Lord of the Rings, or whatever book it is. It's probably an amazing book, but it's not a book that I want. Or based on the conditions that I put in, it's not a book that's profitable. But I don't use that word profitable because that means money, and then they'll start asking more questions. So keep your answers and your responses very vague and don't get too into it with them. So I basically say, yeah, the book's a reject. I'm sure it's an amazing book, but it's not the book I'm looking for, or something like that. So I'll have them scan a few books by themselves. And then so the first thing I basically say to them is, when you walk into a Goodwill, and again, what I'm about to say, you should know because you've done you've done your research. You went to the Goodwills and you know what the process is and how to look for books and stuff like that. So what I'm about to say is stuff that I've learned for myself, and hopefully you've done your research, or maybe not. Maybe you're kind of thinking about doing this, but this is what I usually tell them. As soon as you walk into a Goodwill, for example, the first thing you do is obviously open up your phone, open up your app, go to the bookshelves, obviously, start scanning books. Don't pull them out and look at them first, the condition. Scan, scan, scan. If you scan a book and it comes back as a good, then pull it out all the way, then flip through the pages, look at the top, bottom, side, spine, open up, look at the front cover, look at the back cover, open the front cover, look at the inside front cover and the first page, open the back cover, look at the back inside cover and the back page. Make sure it's in decent condition. And I get into them what decent condition is, obviously no mold or mildew, but usually at Goodwills they're really good at not putting books out like that, so not too much of an issue there. There is highlighting, underlining, excessive writing, whatever. I basically tell them if a book has more than 20, 30, maybe 40% of that, highlighting, writing, underlining, don't even bother. If it has any major rips, don't bother. If it has a lot of stickers, probably don't bother. But again, this is the first time we're meeting, and I also tell them is when you first go, set yourself a limit. Don't buy 100 books the first time because you will make mistakes, and I rather, you or me, the one trying to make this work, is I don't want to waste money on a book. Because usually what I'll do is I'll tell them, buy 10, 20 books, and that's it. That's your limit that first time. And when you do that, we meet and we go over the book. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So once they go into the Goodwill, they'll go ahead and scan away. And basically by then, in the meeting that we had with them, I train them how to look and inspect a book like I told you before. The front inside cover, back inside cover, blah, blah, blah. And then they're on their own. There's nothing else I got to teach them for the most part. So we break away, and I basically I ask them, how often do you think you can go out looking for books? And they might say, 1 or 2 days a week. Perfect. I'm not a micromanager. There's no quota. You don't have to give me 10, 20, 30, 100 books a week. I don't care. But let me know if there's any delays or any issues. Maybe you're going out of town, so I know. So once we break away, I might text them a week later or something if they don't already text me, because usually they do text me right away saying, hey, I went to a book sale or I went to a Goodwill, look at the books I got, blah, blah, blah. So it's exciting for them because it's extra money. It's a little scary at first because some people that you hire, and you'll know this right away, some people that you hire or thinking about hiring when you interview them, they may be more introverted. Like me, believe it or not, I am an introvert. I believe I was, at least. Maybe not anymore, but I'm very reserved. Just me. I'm an engineer, so I'm very analytical. I think a lot. I try to come up with a plan before I do something and before I execute it, usually. But that makes me a little reserved because I can sit back in a group and listen to everyone, and I might ask 1 or 2 questions, but they're pretty relevant, accurate questions. But on the other hand, I do like to talk, and you might think, well, if you're an introvert, how are you doing this on the video camera? Well, I enjoy talking about things that I enjoy about, and I enjoy. So, you're welcome. But I'm also a professor, an adjunct professor at 2 universities, and I love if I know what I'm talking about, and I have the research, the information to back it up, and the experience, of course, I can talk about it all day, and you won't even think that I'm a reserved person. And when I tell people that I'm doing this, they're like, really? It doesn't sound like Lenny, but once they watch the videos, I guess they'll understand why. Anyway, so when you interview people, check their personality because everyone's different. I'm not saying that introverts are bad at this, doing the book sourcing, not at all. I'm not saying that at all. It's just you got to use your best judgment. Some people are lazy. Let's just put it that way. Some people lazy, they don't really want to put the effort to do something. And, I honestly got an email or a text from one person that reached out to me after I put an ad out. And basically all they said was, I need to make money selling books. Tell me how. Or something along those lines. But the way they asked me, and they didn't even tell me their name. They didn't really introduce themselves. It was just a text message or an email. That's all it was. It was, tell me how to make books online, or tell me how to get money for books. And I'm like, really? So I'm not looking for that person to hire. So I'm looking for, I'm a business person. I'm educated. I want to work with someone that's mature, and it doesn't have to be super professional. I hired 2 or 3 college students, and they were doing amazing at the book sourcing. So just be careful when you hire someone. It is a risk. It is a little nerve-wracking, but your first few may be good. They may be bad. It may be a mix of good and bad. Who knows? You won't know until you try. So please try and do your best at it. Now, the other big question that I get from people is, Lenny, aren't you scared that once you hire someone that they'll be your competition eventually down the road? No, not really. Why? Because there are tons of books out there. And yes, I'm basically hitting the Goodwills around my area, so if someone else starts hitting them as well, that's competition. I'm not really concerned because it takes a special someone to do what I'm doing and hopefully you're doing or going to do. That entrepreneurship mindset. Not everyone has it. They may think it sounds great on video or whatever when I hire them. Oh, this is easy. I just have to go get books. But now what? How do I list them? What do I do about taxes? Do I have to get a business name? All these other things start coming to their mind, and then they back off. So I'm not concerned about someone competing with me. I'm not concerned about someone that I hire for 6 months, turn around, disappear, and do their own thing, similar to what I'm doing. Not at all, because it takes a special someone. There is a risk, but it's not that high. It's kind of low. So just keep that in mind. So once I hire them, what I do is I let them on their own, and depending on where they live, some people live pretty close to me. Some people live, an hour or less away from me. And we make up a schedule as far as how often we meet. And what I mean by that is they have books for me because they've sourced them. I have money to give them for those books. So where do we come together to meet and exchange? So we'll meet maybe halfway if it's further away, or maybe we'll meet close by, whatever it is. So we meet. It's a little weird at first because it's the first time you're kind of dealing with them business-wise, and they have books and you have money, and it's an exchange. But it's pretty easy. What you do is, you go up to them. Maybe it's in the parking lot because you don't want to bring 20 books into the store probably, and you can look over the books if you want. Usually, I trust my scanner that I give them, and I trust them in a way that I don't really sit there and look at every single book. What I'll do is I'll say, hey, I'll take the books from you. Here's your money. I'll get back to you, meaning feedback, because that's important. That's extremely important feedback. Because otherwise, if they've gotten, let's say they bought 20 books for you, and the app says they're good, but visually they're not, I want them to know, so next time I do this, if there isn't even a next time with them, that they know what not to do, and they usually listen. So I go home and I look through the books. I look for things that they should have looked for that maybe they missed. Probably 95% of the time, books are good. There's no issue with them. But sometimes maybe they scan too fast, or they forget to look at the back of the book or the inside, and there's mold or mildew on it, or there's a big marker, writing and names and stuff, whatever it is. So I pay them cash. Some I pay via PayPal, which works. So it really depends on how you work it out with them, and they're usually pretty okay with that. But you have to ask them kind of what their situation is. Maybe they only want cash, and maybe they want PayPal only. Who knows? But that's generally it, and that process just repeats itself. Once I get the books for them and I give them money, well, I wait another week or two, and we do it again and again and again, and eventually you have a bunch of books coming into your house or your storage facility, wherever you keep them. Right now I keep them in my house because I'm usually able to churn them out pretty quickly, meaning I send them to FBA. But it's been working out pretty well for me, and I hope that all helped. And there's probably more questions you may have about things, but that's generally my process and how I've gotten my book sources. And right now I have 8 people sourcing books for me. And they're all different types of individuals. Again, some are some are students, some are single parents, some are good friends of mine. Some live 5 minutes away, some live an hour away. But I'm making it work. But one thing to keep in mind, which I've recently found out, is don't go too crazy at first. Don't hire too many people at first, because what's going to happen, and you'll probably realize this very soon too, is let's say you hire 2 people and you're doing your thing, you're getting the books for them, things are working out, and you should be able to manage that amount of books coming in for the most part. Because think about it, you're giving them instant gratification because you're paying them right up front. They're not waiting for the book to sell like you are to make money. So what's going to happen is if you hire too many people and they're giving you 50, 100 books a week a piece, you'll be sending those to Amazon, which might take, you'll definitely get backed up if it's just you. But what's going to happen is you're dishing out all that money up front for them, but you're not getting that money. You're not seeing that money return. So I told some of my sources to back down because we have our third baby coming very soon. My wife is 36 weeks pregnant, so any week now, really. So I don't want to get too involved in dealing with books coming in and stuff like that. So I told my sourcers to kind of take it down a few notches a week, so I can manage things. I don't want to put too much money up front for them, so I want to make sure there's money there. So again, you can manage the money, you can manage how many books you're bringing in and stuff like that. So it's controllable. But yeah, I hope that helps a lot. Now, what I wanted to mention at the very beginning that I kind of said I'd mention later is hiring people to help you list, pack, and ship the books to Amazon. I'm just starting to kind of get into that now. A lot of people have asked me, Lenny, why don't you do that? Why don't you do that? Well, I've listened to you guys, and I definitely am trying that. So I'll make another video on this once I kind of get through that. But I've already did my research, and it's 100% possible. I'll give you a little bonus there. So right now I have book sourcers getting books from me, which is working out. Now the flip side of it is I got to send these books out to Amazon. Now, do I have time for that? Kind of right now I do, but pretty soon with the baby coming I won't, or I won't have as much time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire someone that I know, that I trust. I already talked to them and they're very excited about it. And I'm going to pay them 50 cents a book to list them and send them and ship them. I'm going to give them all my equipment, my scale, my printer, my thermal printer, the boxes that I have, all the equipment they need. And then I use pretty much two pieces of software when I ship books. Amazon.com, the seller account, which you guys should know about. I did a video on it. And Inventory Lab. I haven't done a video on that yet, but I will. Or at least as of right now, I have not. But Inventory Lab and Amazon.com, what you can do with both of those websites is you can create user accounts for your employees. So they have access to do the things that need to be done as far as shipping, but they don't see everything else. They don't see your sales. They don't see your information, what you've sold. They can maybe see your inventory, but it's not a big deal. But I've already researched that. I set up a dummy account so I can see on both platforms kind of what the employee sees, and it looks 100% doable. So that's my plan, and I'll get back to you guys with that. But this video, like I said, is mainly about hiring book sourcers to kind of get the books for you. And I really hope it's helped. Any questions you have, because I'm probably sure I missed something, but any questions you may have about the process, let me know. Again, do your research. Please do your research, because you don't want any surprises, and you don't want your book sources to have any surprises when they go start sourcing books. Do your research. Sign up for Craigslist. It's free, but I mean, you can just post an ad. So do your research. Create a Craigslist ad. I'll go ahead and put my ad that I put there in the description. Go ahead and have the interview with them. Do an email exchange. Make sure that their personality is somewhat decent for them to go out and get books. And then, have a phone interview with them, meet them. One thing I forgot to mention, which is pretty important, is when you meet with them, what do you do? So you meet with them, I said you show them how to scan, but what I do with the app is I ask them for their phone. I go ahead and go to asellertool.com, and I sign up a subscription for them. But before I do that, I actually go to either the Play Store or the Apple Store or the App Store. I download FBA Scan. I register an account. The cool thing about FBA Scan is the username you register with, I usually use my main username dash a couple of initials or something that identifies them. So if their name is Jim, I put my account dash Jim is the account name, username for FBA Scan. And then the password gets automatically generated. But I put my email address, and you can do that. Email addresses can be the same for all the scatters that you have, but the username should obviously be unique. So again, I use my username minus and then some unique identifier for the book scatter. And then I hit register. And then once you register within the app, then you go to asellertool.com. and you sign up. I signed up for the Lite subscription, which is $9.95 a month. And what I do is I sign up through my PayPal account, so I don't enter my credit card number. I just sign in through PayPal. And then remember, when you're done signing up, you log out of PayPal on their phone. And then you go back to the FBA scan app and you just hit account check or something like that, or save, and it checks the account, and then they have unlimited scans. They're good to go. If you don't sign up an account for them, they have 100, I believe 100 free scans with FBA scan, but you know, they'll get through that pretty quickly. So make sure you actually subscribe to an account and set it up on their phone. So I go ahead, again, just to repeat it, I go ahead and download the app, register them on the app, sign up online, subscribe on acelleratour.com for the Lite plan, and then sync it up to their phone, basically, or hit save, and they're good to go. And then they go ahead and scan all they want. So yeah, I forgot about that part. So yeah, any questions, let me know. If you guys enjoyed this, please go ahead and smash that like button. Add any comments, you have any questions, or just kind of a, hey, great video. Or if you have any specific questions about it, or maybe a video you want me to do about hiring people, let me know. I'll go ahead and do a separate video on something else specifically if that helps. Also, if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe so you get notified about all the other videos that come out from me. So again, thanks so much for watching, and have an awesome day.